This podcast is brought to you by Mapper Forward's new Patreon community, the Global Coffee Think Tank. Check the show notes or head to patreon.com/Mapper Forward to find out how you can become a member today. Welcome back to the Daily Coffee Pro by Mapper Forward, friends. I'm your host, Lee Safar, and I am joined by Dr. Sarada Krishnan from the Crop Trust, not the Food Trust, the Crop Trust. Welcome back, Dr. Krishnan.
Thank you. Thank you. Lovely to be back.
We are today talking about how food security got so challenging in society. And, a few years ago, the conversation was about the coffee price crisis. Now we're looking at things like the crisis with regards to the frost occurrences that keep happening in Brazil. And Brazil is such a huge agricultural contributor to the world, with coffee and corn and soy and soybeans, and a lot of food that comes out of there. Now we're threatened by geopolitical issues in Russia and Ukraine, who are huge wheat contributors and other inputs to crops around the world. So how did we get to a position in the world where food security is something that is top in mind of governments around the world?
This is a huge issue. Mm-hmm. And, we are, as we talked in the earlier episode, we've become such a global, food has become such a global
It's globalized.
thing.
Yeah.
It is globalized, and we are dependent. I mean, any country cannot do everything by themselves, because we have to depend on another country to get some of the inputs or resources, or even for to sell our products, exporting and all of that. We have become dependent on other countries, and then there are countries where the fertility, or they have other climatic challenges, which lead to famine. And this is a very tough.
But it is a problem, right? Like we do have an issue with food security because of, again, we could go back to politics a little bit here, because often food is weaponized, right?
Yeah, and it's yes, food is weaponized. And the thing is, a lot of the smallholder farmers who grow the food, they grow it for importation to other countries, and they end up starving because they don't have enough food to feed themselves or their families.
Can you help our audience understand that a little bit better?
That a lot of the countries, they depend on, the smallholder farmers depend on the income from what they're producing to feed their families. Mm-hmm. And so they're growing the food, but then they're the ones who have the food and nutrition insecurity, because they don't have enough money. So they have, when you are a smallholder farmer, in addition to food and clothing and schooling, they have so many other priorities and sometimes the food and nutrition takes the hit when they have to do a lot of other things for their families.
Right. And so obviously smallholder farmers are not making millions of dollars off their coffee cherries.
No.
And they're usually taking loans at 30 to 50% from banks in order, if they have a down year with their crop. So they're constantly behind the 8 ball. And then you end up with a situation like what we've got right now with inflation, playing such a hefty burden on smallholder producers, because you've got, in the economy, the price of coffee going up, and farmers are celebrating that the C price is at record highs, but fertilizer is up 600% year on year.
Yeah. And, that is the thing, is the prices are never stable. And I'm not sure if you have heard of many farmers in India committing suicide, because the suicide among farmers has gone up quite a bit, because they are not finding a way out of how to support their families. And because, like, exactly the same thing, because they owe debts to either the landlords or they may have a leased property that just can't, if they don't get enough money out of that crop, then they can't repay their loans that they have taken for the inputs.
I recently heard a report on NPR where they were saying the same thing was happening with US farmers because of the stress during the COVID pandemic.
Yeah.
So when we say food security, are we talking about just politics? Are we talking about climate change and our ability of different crops to adapt to the changes in climate change? What are we talking?
Yeah, I think it is all of it.
Okay.
It is all of it. Climate change can lead to food insecurity. And because drought and you don't have a crop, that you don't have a good harvest, then you don't get enough income to sustain your family. And then when you are crop diversification is important, because if you have a monocrop and you are relying on just one crop to for your income, then if a disease epidemic comes through, then it wipes out your entire crop. And that is why in coffee we always say agroforestry or a multi-cropping system, because coffee, you just get a coffee crop, the harvest is only for a short window of the year, within the short window of the year. And so you have to make your money during that to sustain you through the entire year. So if you had a multi-cropping system as an agroforestry system, then you have additional income that you get from the other crops that you're growing in the farm.
Does that make coffee a sustainable thing to farm if you're always dependent on other crops on your farm?
Coffee, that also, agroforestry is also another climate change mitigation for coffee. Because by growing shade trees that you can either harvest for timber or it provides some other crop, you are also, in addition to getting a second crop, you're also providing shade cover for your coffee plants that provides a little bit of respite from a drought, or it reduces the evapotranspiration from the soil and keep the conditions are much better in a drought situation if you have shade cover.
Is science going to be the thing that solves our food security, do you think?
Science, yes. Science has to, because in addition to, so conserving crop diversity and using that crop diversity. So it is not enough for us to conserve crop diversity in the seed banks or field gene banks. We need to develop programs of how to use that crop diversity through breeding programs to ensure. So we really need to invest in the research and science part of it. So that way we can use those as tools for developing resilient crops.
There's a part on the Crop Trust's website, which is the seed bank, which, folks, we've got a link to it in the show notes. Go and check it out, because it really does look like they're getting ready for the apocalypse. And it's a fascinating read. It essentially, what it sounds like they've done is they've done like the Noah's Ark of seeds. They've taken 2 of every species and they've put it in a cold storage in Antarctica, I think.
Not Antarctica, in the Arctic.
In the Arctic, sorry.
Svalbard.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I have a strange question that came from a listener of the podcast when they found out that you were coming on the podcast and they saw this on the website. How do we know those seeds are going to grow? So
many of these seeds have a life, the viability. They do have long-term viability.
Oh, okay.
So maybe, if you put thousands of seeds, maybe a certain portion, maybe even 20% germinating and you getting a crop being able to grow is a good thing. But it is better than not having anything saved for the future.
Right.
And I want to give you an example of
please.
From the global seed vault. So once there are 80 plus countries that have deposited, and anything talking about sovereignty, it belongs to the country who deposited them.
So it's like a safety deposit box?
It's a safety deposit. It's a they call it the black box. Okay. It is a safety deposit. So each country owns the seeds that they have put into that safety deposit box. And so there is one of the CGIAR centers is called ICARDA. It's the International Center for Dryland Agriculture.
Mm-hmm.
And it was based in Aleppo, Syria. And Aleppo from ICARDA did back up their seeds at the Global Seed Vault. And when all the civil war happened in Syria, the gene bank was destroyed. And so that was the only time the seeds were withdrawn from because of the safe deposit box, the seeds that were deposited there, they were able to withdraw those seeds to establish 2 sister ICARDA gene banks in Lebanon and in Morocco.
Mm-hmm.
And it was from the germplasm that was in Syria that they were able to bring it back and start all of those varieties and all the germplasm to get them to grow again, and then collect seeds and then deposit back again. So this is a perfect example of the use of the reason why we need to save those seeds in gene banks.
Yeah, wow, how exciting. I mean, there is some kind of I feel a little bit safer with regards to food security, knowing that there's a seed vault. And I guess we just have to trust that it's going to work, and that we're happy that there are people like you that are working on making sure that we can stabilize the supply of food around the world into the future. But the challenges are getting more and more excessive, right?
Yes. The challenges are, so many challenges. And with coffee, the challenge is we can't put them in the seed vault because coffee cannot be conserved as seeds. They need to be conserved in field, what we call the field gene banks, as plants. But then there are challenges. And here an example is in Madagascar, where you have one gene bank in the Kianjawato area in southeastern Madagascar, eastern Madagascar. And then there was another gene bank in Ilka Est, which was completely wiped out due to a hurricane, a cyclone coming through, and it was all wiped out. So all these gene banks, what we call a safety duplication, you should not put all your eggs in one basket. If you have just one gene bank that is holding it, then when it is exposed to the vagaries of a climate, hurricane or a drought comes and everything dies, or a disease comes and wipes out everything, then that is all gone. So we really need to have a safe another location where there is safety duplication. And a lot of times what we do is we do cryopreservation. A lot of the plants that cannot be conserved as seeds too, coffee can also be cryopreserved. So you put it in liquid nitrogen at negative 190 plus degree Fahrenheit, and grow and leave them there. And then when you need them, you take them out, and you develop procedures on how to regrow them once they have been in cryopreservation.
Okay. So we're going to wrap up this episode. The next 2 episodes, we're going to talk specifically about coffee. We're going to talk about the state of coffee crops in general around the world, and then the future of coffee.
Okay.
To wrap up the series. Okay. Peace, love, and peanut butter, everybody. Have an amazing rest of your day. Thanks, friends. If you enjoyed this video, here's what you should check out next. Consider supporting Map It Forward on Patreon, and be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell before you leave.